everybody.
Riley.
Hey. I'm working on a startup right now called Open Data, and the talk I'm going to be giving is on MCP Apps, which is a very, very new spec. People might have glossed over the app part of that, but it's very different than MPC server. And what it allows you to do is use something like Claude Desktop as an actual client interface to render UI on, rather than something like the browser, whereas like MCP server is going to be more about the communication tools between something like Claude Desktop or another type of MCP client to provide tool use and extension for an agent or LLM. To go into this, I feel like I need to give a little bit of background on what Open Data is to best communicate why an MCP app, because that'll kind of like paint a better picture as to like the problem being solved and why an MCP app is the right solution for it and not something like an in-app or web app type of interface. So what I'm doing right now is I am effectively making the equivalent of what GitHub did for code for data sets and data scientists. So if you've ever worked in open source data using something like the BLS CPI report or something like that, you'll notice that it's very difficult and verbose to work with free and public data sets provided to us by either the government or nonprofit agencies or other kinds of things that collect it and open it up for free. And so there's a couple different problems that it's solving. One is the discoverability issue of even finding those data sets themselves. You have multiple providers. You have this CDC and the World Health Organization, both health related data sets, but completely disparately different and in different places, different formats, different ways to find them. Data portals. And so what I'm doing is I'm taking all of those really difficult data sets and ingesting them into a centralized system so that the discovery piece of that can be made really easy. So there's kind of like two different user cohorts. One is the more traditional data scientist cohort, which might use, that's kind of this view here, might use the system very similar to how we use GitHub. And then the other side would be more of the enterprise piece, which is the people that are actually using these data sets. That could be a data scientist within an enterprise, but if you think about it for something like a political campaign, might want to do research on the local housing rates or housing costs within a city or a state or nationally. They would be going into the very similar data sets and trying to pull and extract information and compare it to maybe other data sets. And so that's, those are the two sides. Now, the latter side there, the enterprise side, is the bigger challenge that I've been trying to deal with because typically these users are non-technical. So they're not gonna be wanting to write SQL. And so the easiest way that I started demoing things was by creating a, kind of like a repo, what is it, open data, I don't know if I can show it here. I'll find it later, but I have a repo that I use as, with Claude Code just to generate reports. And those reports actually end up looking very similar to something like this, where it goes through and actually writes a journalistic article with charts of the problem and the things that it's finding from the platform. And so that's great for me, generating reports with Claude Code, but obviously you are not going to be handing a CLI terminal user interface to someone who's like manager of a political campaign or someone who works at a consultant agency that's working with another company, right? And so I ran into the challenge of what is that interface? How do I build that? Do I build it within the application and have the traditional chat UI kind of thing and reinvent basically what Claude Desktop and all the other MCP clients have done very well with massive teams, or do I try to figure out a way how to integrate with them? And so that's how I came across MCP Apps. It's a very new spec. I think it's 3 months old at this point. And what it does is it allows third-party integrations into those applications. And so you can start rendering rich UI within Claude Desktop itself. That's the main one I've been building against, but you can do it also within basically all the kind of elite tier models. I haven't fact-checked if Gemini is in there, but I don't know. People might not consider that elite tier, but there are certain, like, the spec is very new and very unsupported. And so some of the things that I found kind of fascinating is coming from a historical front-end technical perspective, is it feels very similar to like the 2013, 2015 era that I worked, where you build something and it broke on every single browser, and you had to go like literally test it on every single browser, and things like, what was it, Browser Stack? Like companies like that actually existed to solve that problem. I don't know who would use Browser Stack now I'm thinking about it, but today that is not really a problem. You can pretty much develop in Chrome, and kind of 98% of the time it's going to work everywhere. If you don't take into consideration IE11, if you happen to have to support that, some people do. But because MCP apps render within Claude Desktop itself now is like a client, right? Like, I can tell from working with it from a developer experience perspective that I'm pretty sure it's an Electron app, so it's running some level of a Electron or, what is it that, it's not, Chromium-based rendering engine. But the dynamics on how you actually integrate with that Chromium engine is very, very different. There's all kinds of security guardrails, very limited access to the outside sandbox. And so therefore you start running into all kinds of issues because a specific spec, maybe because it's 3 months old, is like not documented. Like you have to go look at like how, or even reason through the way that Claude engineers might have opened or not certain aspects of that relationship between the client. So with that, I'll give you an example, an actual live example of the MCP client working. I wrote this on the fly because David, you were talking about how the government IT contracts don't pay very well, and I'm going to test that because I have that data in open data, and so.
Don't pay me well.
Yeah, well, I have a feeling they pay some organizations well, so we'll take a look at that and actually run this query. So the query that I have here is looking at the, it is vaguely asking for the Texas IT contracts data, which is open, and you can get it, I believe it's from the comptroller, where you can see what the state of Texas is awarding in terms of IT contracts, like how much money they're giving to certain organizations, and it's like, I think it might be millions of rows, I think it's like hundreds of thousands of rows, but it's like, to piece that all together is very manual because you can't just say, show me the largest row, you have to say, give me the aggregate over the years of all of the 17,000 contracts one intermediary agency has gotten that is basically a passive organization. So that's what this query is doing, is it's basically asking the system to go through and use the Open Data MCP to interact with the Open Data engine to extract insights, and then what we'll see is that it will start writing graphs and queries, and I can show you the actual UI that's being generated and displayed that is coming from my MCP Apps server. So one of the things you can see here is it's doing just a natural language query, Texas State, IT contracts, technology spending. And then I built kind of like an AI first API that is then returning results based on that, given what's in the database. So like the first things that come up are like state, Texas State financials by county, Texas summarized trends, financial data, DIR cooperative contract sales. This is probably the one.
What are the percentages?
The percentages are the estimation of a match to the query. So it's saying it thinks that this has a 96% like relatedness to the query. So if it goes down and starts dropping, TIFA student application by ISD, like that isn't really that related. I haven't say 85%, but yeah, obviously the ones that are higher, these are all directly related pretty much to the query. Something that's cool about the UI here itself is that it does allow you to do things like deep linking. So if you wanted to actually load this query, you can click on it and go. It takes you directly to the platform, and you can go do the search results yourself and click in and see the actual base data sets here that were returned in this summary. You can also just go directly on one of these too and just go straight to that source too. And just to touch on that one more time, the things you can do within here is a lot of enterprises and even individuals would want to use this data within their own platforms, being like Excel, right? So you could deep link back into here, and the person can just go in and download whatever format they want. If they want an Excel version of this, that's the entire data set now squeezed into Excel. So they can load it into whatever they use for that kind of thing. It did another query here, Texas Ethics Commission campaign contribution donation. So there's the TEC campaign finance contribution, so very relevant. And campaign finance expenditures. So these are open data sets that show what campaigns are bringing in and then also the money going out. So as you can see here, 34 million rows, right? So this is like a huge, huge data set. Then what it did is it looks like it started looking specifically at the contract sales, which then returned to the agent the schema of this data set and the description of what it does, so it can get a context as to how to work with it. Yeah.
I guess I'm not aware of the scope of the open data sets, but is there any legal data? Like,
Yeah, there's probably plenty of open legal data. As long as it's legal, the platform can ingest it. As long as it's open, the platform can ingest it. So if it's like a proprietary data set, if it requires like a license, it's not really something I want to bring in. I certainly don't want to license it because it's expensive. But if it's an open data set that has to do with legal cases, for example, I'm sure there's like court case results or something like that that has to be published. 100% could be ingested. Yep. So yeah, it's just giving the full schema to the agents so that they can learn how to query against these. So that's what it's doing right now, is it's looking at those different pieces. You can see there's 3 errors that it made, and each one of these will actually return instructions back to the agent on telling you what it did wrong, so it can learn how to correct itself, which you can see that it corrected itself here. And let's see what else it does. So now it's doing some queries. Eventually it'll probably do like a cool join. Another cool thing we can do here is we can actually expand and see what was returned if we wanted to, and actually sort it within the UI. But all of these UI elements here are things that I wrote and are being rendered within Claude Desktop. These are not native supported within Claude at all. I'm extending on top of it. So even things like sorting, right? Like this is all just happening within an iframe. And let's see if it's going to start getting into charting here anytime soon. It's still crunching data. It's doing a lot of querying. I'm trying to see if I can find an SQL, but it happens to have not chosen to write any SQL yet. But it can do actual raw SQL writing, and what it would do with that is like it might take like 3 or 4 data sets and join them together, and then return basically a superset of a data set to be able to start charting. But what it's doing now is it looks like it is starting to create a React dashboard for some reason. But that is not what it should be doing. It should be writing a chart. So we'll see what, I've never seen it try to do that before, so we'll see how that actually renders out. But if it gets hung up, then I'll stop it and then reprompt it to actually use the open chart, which I presented last time about, but it'll actually write and render open charts directly within the Claude Desktop UI of the kind of data sets it's querying against. So it'll have like all the bar charts and line graphs and all that kind of things. You'll end up seeing kind of those pieces. So like while it's still kind of churning away here, what I can do is I can show like an example of one that it did return some data sets for.
Riley, I have a question.
Yeah.
UIs aren't the most agent-friendly interface.
Mm-hmm.
What does the agent see whenever it's rendering that? Like, is there some textual version of the MCP like app snippets that it is able to see and interpret?
So the MCP app, actually backing it is the MCP server and their tools. So, and I think what we ran into here is I think I hit my rate limit on the quit, because I have a rate limit set on the API, and it went a little nuts on here. So I have a feeling that it started hitting the rate limit. So we'll see if it's able to finish. But to answer your question, if you look at each one of these here, where it says something at the top like query dataset, that's the query dataset tool. And the query dataset tool provides instructions on what the query dataset does. So it tells it about the Open Data API, similar to how the skill, I have a skill too that ships similar to the skill and saying like, this is how you query a dataset, this is how you write SQL against a dataset. Similarly, these ones up here that showed full renderings of, see, it did write an entire dashboard, that's actually fine. This is not my MCP app. But I guess the query was complex enough that it felt like it needed to do like a full in-depth dashboard here. But these other ones up on the top here that are different, like there's a lot of query data sets, but here's search data sets, right? That's another tool. There's also the open chart tool. So each one of those tools will tell it a little bit what the tool does. So the open chart one might give it the specs on like what kind of charts are supported and the schemas on how they are able to be written. That's why when I wrote open chart, I wrote it to be agent first, to be something where you write a JSON config rather than a D3 based like chained .render type thing, is because I wanted to be able to fit it into platforms like this, and the agent just has to write a spec rather than writing code.
Question.
Yeah.
So you're saying that the MCP like describes the data and Claude renders it. So if I use this in like Gemini, would Gemini render it slightly differently?
Yeah. So I haven't actually tried it outside of Claude Desktop, but I am certain it would break in other clients. Like the the way different things, in fact, some of them don't even support it. I'm certain of that, including Claude doesn't, Claude Web, I think, doesn't support the spec yet, or the MCP's server spec. So if I go to my chats and go to the one we just did, I'm pretty sure these will all error. Oh, maybe they just implemented this because this did not work like a couple days ago. I do know that the iPhone app doesn't work. So if I pull that out and show you guys, like I'd be very surprised if they like somehow shipped that too or something. But this didn't work a couple days ago because it was clear that they had not supported the MCP spec in the web app version, right? So if Anthropic is that far behind just within their own platform, I'd be certain that there'll be other platforms that either don't have it implemented or it is off spec somehow because there is no W3C that's like holding everyone's hand here.
Because it's still text though, so it is broken, kinda.
Well, this is all the UI widgets that I wrote. So this does look correct to me. There is part of the MCP spec though that can return two different payloads. One is the actual HTML that we rendered, and the other one is text for fallback. I haven't implemented that into mine right now, but that's how you would have graceful degradation between ones that don't support it, is they could read just the text-based thing, and what you would do is you'd like return a summary. If it was a graph, you'd say like, I don't know, in text what the graph was. That might be a little hard to do programmatically, but that's effectively like the interface that they've opened up for that, yeah.
So it's deciding to run like a query dataset tool that you provided, and then you also tell it to show that to the user in this way?
Well, kind of. It's using the query dataset tool,
Yeah.
and that tool returns back HTML and it renders it in an iframe. So the tool is returning HTML, which is this.
And so it's interpreting that HTML to go on to the next step?
No, because it's also providing it the JSON result. So
Okay,
so
okay.
so like there's the human display,
Okay.
and then there's the one given to the LLM to know what it's doing. That's why when it was looking at something like the dataset cards, it renders to us like a card, but it's just saying like the schema of the title, description, and then the schema of the data.
And so some of those don't actually have HTML, and they wouldn't render like your error one?
All of these do,
Oh, okay,
in what
okay.
we're looking at, but you could return effectively anything, and it would still render it in an iframe or something like that, I guess. But or are you saying in the LLM response that it reads?
Yes, like I was saying, like, okay, we give it some tool calls,
Yeah.
but
So
I wouldn't expect to render the result of every tool call, because it might just be something internally it would use to do the next step.
for these tools, they're specifically for querying and returning data, and that data, if it has a schema like this one is returning the search results, can be rendered deterministically in a UI.
Yeah.
So that's what that's doing for the human side, and then on the other side, it's returning effectively like a JSON blob of like the results with each data set for it to read on what it does.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, I can do it.
Me?
Yeah.
So I know Claude has a lot of built-in components too for doing a lot of this
Yeah.
visualization stuff. So what made you decide, like, what was your like reasoning for deciding to write your own versus using theirs and just only providing the data via MCP regular?
Yeah, so certainly it falls a little bit short on things like charting, including, or table stuff, including sorting. Very much will for rendering cards, right? If I want to return search results like this where I'm linking out to something, that you certainly could not do deterministically, where you just like render a list of search results that then links out to the app, right? Like it's not going to do that.
You could do a bulleted list and then you have to type in do that one, right?
I guess, but you have to like instruct users, to, you know what I mean? I don't think that would work.
Mhm.
The other one would be is I think the bigger argument is like why use OpenChart as opposed to Plotly, which is what they support natively. Similarly, other ones might not have anything, so you could have a fallback to OpenChart. I personally like the styling and the actual like design that I put into OpenChart, so I just like the visualization better. It does an okay job, but it's not going to support a Sankey diagram, for example, or like a Gantt chart, right? I'm like full confidence it's not going to support that. So I ship like a full suite of something like 20 or 30 different types of charts. So I know that I can, with the right instruction, have it write the right spec to give the right result, right? If we were looking at like financial data that was ins and outs, it would know to use the Sankey diagram and it could just render it. That would be the main reason that I would say is it's like, you definitely can have it render stuff on its own, especially Claude Desktop, because it is actually quite good at graphing and that kind of thing. The other piece which, let me see if I can finish this prompt so we can see the actual open chart, it's because this will give you a better example. Open charts.
It's also the universality of it, right? So you can use other clients too. You're not just locked into Claude. So just because
Correct.
Claude can do it doesn't mean that Codex is going to do it, or that.
Yeah,
all these other things.
correct. But the bigger one is, imagine where I was talking about the cohort that I'm working for this piece specifically is non-technical people that are trying to build charts. So this is an open chart rendering. I can open it in Open Data, the website, and I can start editing it. In fact, yeah.
Very nice.
Yeah, if you guys want to see some great stuff, my error states are amazing. So I will take, or I'm very confident that I'm going to illustrate. Let's see. I think it didn't save by the time it opened. So let's see if we can get it to actually do that.
Race condition.
Still not. If this did work, what it does is it opens the chart into an editor. So you can actually like change the texts, right? Like I could go in here and edit this. I could go and put an annotation like this dip here if I knew what it was. I could put a range annotation that says like what would this be? IT spending looks like it dropped during 2018. I don't really know what that would have been in the context of the Texas state. But if you knew what it was, you could do annotations the same way that what I'm mimicking here really is I'm making an AI generated open wrapper or data wrapper, which looks like this is what like the New York Times style journalists would use to build charts. And what you can see is things like this, right? It's called Chrome, and like they're more like infographics than charts. I'm allowing people to kind of like buy that, if that makes sense. So it'll start you at the base, and you can fix it. So what I've noticed with my own work is that it gets you like 80% of the way there. Odds are people are going to want to go in and like add an annotation or like literally move it over. So this one doesn't happen to have an annotation, but these would be good examples of ones is like right here, right? You like maybe this is too low because sometimes it puts it too low. You can actually just drag it and then saves. And then you can export it. So the other thing that you can't do natively with the graphs within Claude Desktop is you cannot export it. There's no saved PNG or something. When I link out to the web version, it has, you can save it as SVG, PNG, or JPG, just one click. So those are the kinds of tools that it enables is like you have to get that control out of the platform because the limitations on the sandbox is so tight that you can't like download or take a snapshot and download within the Claude Desktop experience. It's also technically good for engagement because I can like get them out into something else. So it's a bit of a hack too, but we can go through a little bit of the data. So if you look at, so I think these are billions. Since 2019, spending on just IT in Texas went from 2 billion to what was that, 3.5 billion?
That's when I moved to.
Yeah, exactly. Dell Marketing, the biggest one, Apple, Cisco Systems, those are the biggest people getting paid in the billions, right? Is that billions? Dell a quarter, oh no, that's the percentage. It didn't really render the what scale it's doing very well, but contract types, the biggest paying one is security, and then what's pink? Services, software. And the ones I'm surprised it didn't show here is the individual IT pass-through shell companies that get paid, but I could reprompt it and get that. But then it shows like top Texas political contributions by recipients, and then they could tie that to which particular people are being paid by the IT contract. So when I ran this query in my repo, what I found was there's a bunch of these basically like middlemen companies. All they do is they just get awarded contracts. And they take about like something like 7 or 10% and they pass it through to like Google because it's really hard and takes a long time to land a government contract. So there's companies that all they do is they just get those contracts. And if you look at the people getting all those contracts, their business has grown from like, it was something crazy like $5 million a year like 5 years ago, and now it's like $300 million a year, right? So these companies are like drastically increasing their take. And then you can see directly like the literal person that awards IT contracts is like the same people that they're like paying to. Like you can see it all through the data. It's really interesting. So yeah, that's it. We're probably close to time. So like I'll open it to questions if anybody has any questions on this kind of stuff. Yeah.
This looks like a journalism form. It's really nice.
Yeah, the kind of cohorts are like nearly infinite. Journalism is a big one. I have a whole, let's see, enter. This will give you like a kind of organized idea of who would be potentially buying this, but like journalism is definitely a cohort that I'm offering like a steep discount to if anyone wants to do, because I know like this as like entities go, they are the most flush with cash. Which certainly for data investigation, huge win, because if anyone's ever worked in the space, it's like 80% of your time you spend on data cleaning. Same problem with anyone doing data investigating journalism work. So yeah, that's a really big one.
I know MCP like UI was a thing maybe 6 months, a year ago even that people talk about. Is this just like an iteration on that? Do you even know?
I'm not sure what MCP UI
Okay,
was,
there's something yeah,
but
okay.
maybe it's an evolution of that. I
Okay.
know that the MCP repo, the MCP app, MCP app, you can literally just look at the first commit, and it was like 3 or 4 months ago.
Okay.
MCP app repo.
Interesting.
MCP apps were like January or December.
Okay, yeah.
'Cause yeah, UI was like very early iterations of talking about
So long ago.
embedding like UIs into a chat experience to sell products or whatever.
Yeah, I'm
And
just gonna
so-
take a moment
okay.
to hunt this down, but yeah.
That's fine. I'll look into it. Okay.
Yeah, the actual MCP app is like very new. So yeah, I'm not really sure what MCP UI was, or if that is still a thing, or
No idea. Yeah.
What's your level of confidence that MCP app will continue?
Oh, that's actually a good point. So one of the reasons that I did this was because I wanted non-technical users to be able to easily query and use the platform. And I figured that MCP apps were the best way, because I really don't want to rebuild the product of a chat interface. But the verbosity of installation is still a barrier, because you install it the same way you install an MCP app. And the easiest way right now, let's see if I can reproduce it, it's like you go to Claude, you go to settings, you go to connectors, you go to customize, and then you add it here. So I'd add a new one, you say add custom connector, and then you put the name, and then you literally put like mine's mcp.opendata.ai/mcp. Now, that's easy enough for us, right? Like that doesn't sound that crazy, but like imagine like a journalist who's not technical, right? It's like they're gonna get lost in the weeds on that. So I have like documentation on that, but that also tells me like, unless they get closer and closer to one click, or like a store, or like something where they can just like port it in, I have very low confidence that this is actually gonna like continue on. At least for my initial scaling plan, I still think that it's better for me to walk people through this one by one as I try to like onboard organizations. But especially without those user experience problems fixed, I do not think this will catch on outside of the engineering community, because it's like pretty common sense.
Wait, does Claude not have a plugin like system like that has that kind of interface that's basically just a shim for like?
Not that I was able to find.
That's
So
crazy.
like
Okay.
I was looking today.
I know like
and
Codex has that.
yeah, there is some kind of new marketplace thing that
Yeah.
sounds like it's getting started as like
Okay.
submit your stuff. So like it sounds like that's what they're going
Okay.
towards, but at least right now it's like the integrations like Google Drive seems to be like a Google Anthropic partnership. It's not
Yeah.
like they submit it to a store.
Got
and
it.
they, like,
Yeah. So they're
integrate.
kind of
Like I don't even know where you would go to find the Claude connector store, right?
That's
like
so
everything
funny.
UI.
It's
So,
the same
but that's what they would need, right? Something like that, and then some verified way of like
Yeah.
how you make sure that people aren't shipping bad
Sure,
extensions
sure.
or like.
I mean, yeah,
it's-
like marketplaces. We've been doing this
yeah,
for a while.
But yeah, I have. It's been a good experiment, because I think that it bridges the gap on what I want to do. And again, I really don't want to like reinvent the chat interface, but in theory, I probably might have to. For the true layman user at scale, I can't walk through 1,000 people a week on how to do this, right? Like I would need to have some sort of a query interface. Enterprises are generally very open to very large payment packages for access to hard to get data. So in theory, if that price is high enough, I don't really care about the inference cost. So that's my biggest concern, though. Is if I build a direct inference chat piece, that now I have to be worried about like at $20 a month. But if someone uses $40 for the inference, and then I'm like in the I'm paying for users. So yes.
Are there like ARPCs, like, are there like these primitives behind the scenes, like if like MCP app dies tomorrow, like how easy is it to convert to like a different platform?
A lot of the stuff that I was doing actually is fairly reusable. I was writing in a way where some of the primitives that I was building for the MCP app are effectively UI modules that can be rendered anywhere. So if I did write my own interface, they become kind of like what Orly was showing with the kind of like that, right? Where those are just
I
modules
built
that can
something
write.
for Collier with Sheridan, but I built like the DO, like the durable objects, like agent. Like I was wondering if I could onboard it to that.
Yeah, if you keep your primitives primitive enough, then you can just rip them out and yeah. at least right now, what I have behind the scenes is a Preact application, so it's in theory React components. That brings up a whole other kind of limitation of MCP apps. I don't know how long people have, but it's like every single one you have to ship the entire HTML payload as a single entity, which is one of the reasons why when I load something new, it's like it takes a long time because literally like every response is an HTML payload, right? And you have to generate every time. There's no like caching. It's like the whole thing, which is a bit of the rough edges as well. So you see this like all of them are loading, right? It's just how it is. Also, every single time I open up a new one, those are all MCP API, MCP app server requests to my server. So like someone loads their thing and scrolls up and I get like hosed with like 50 requests because it's loading all the modules, which isn't great from like a scaling perspective. Is like, what if 1,000 people opened up their things at the same time and all of a sudden it's like flooded with like 10,000 requests in a second, right? It's like a very not great.
Can you not just like super hard cache those on a CDN though, since they are generated once?
That's the part that I haven't really looked into yet.
Okay, sorry.
But in theory, I guess if you cache the HTML,
I mean, if
and
it's
then
always
return-
unique, like if you're not every single one it's a unique
Yeah.
request that's never going to change. 'Cause it's
that
been
would be the
generated
next
once.
thing to start for me to
Okay.
start looking into. But
I'm curious to hear their
yeah,
thoughts.
that I don't really know. Right now, I'm just like adhering to
It
the
is
spec,
crazy,
and the spec is
yeah.
like return me HTML to everything.
That's
and so
wild,
it's
yeah.
like there's no JavaScript asset, right?
That's
There's
so funny.
it's all inline. So
Dang, long
yeah.
live server rendering then. That's great.
yeah,
How,
yeah.
how did your open chart, or theoretically, how would your open chart and your website work? Did you send all the data it needed in the open button?
Yeah, let's see if I can get one of these to work. So I'll show you what's happening under the hood.
Yeah.
When you click open, it's going to make a post request of the payload, and it's going to save it to a hash. So you see this hash?
Yeah.
And that's basically the config, because the config is just JSON. So it's posting the config to that hash, which it had to have resolved, I guess. So I don't know what happened here with the 404s, but
That's super weird.
oh, you know what it is? I know what it is. I think I'm logging with different users. Let me try this, because it's 404 because it's a draft. And okay, hold on, let me try this. I have a feeling this is going to work now. Okay.
This is like the other benefit to me. Yeah, like you're saying. Okay, so I'm getting it now. Like why this is actually valuable to have it as your own primitives and have it as
there you go.
actual like.
I was having different users, so it 404 because it's like you're not authorized. So yes, it's sending a payload, and that payload now is stored within this hash, and that hash is then able to load it here. Now, if I publish this, it becomes part of my portfolio. So this is showing more of the product stuff, but like this is my portfolio. I would have different things here about if I'm a data scientist, I want to save my queries or my visualizations and share them. Every single what I call views, which is it's a query on top of a base data set, becomes a fully public API endpoint. Because really all it is a transformation of the underlying data. If I wanted, I think regional GDP is, this is just aggregating the GDP of a region, but that's calculating it off of the OWID GDP, which is like a bunch of rows from different countries, right? So in theory, this now becomes like a fully queryable API endpoint here that people can depend on and use for any kind of application. But to get back to the data visualization part, there's all kinds of things where this gets into in terms of like social sharing and collaborative, like the collaborative features, as well as the editing features for something like an editor or a consultant that is doing a report for someone that wants to embed this in their PowerPoint presentation. So like the one-click exports are like share, not the URL, where is the actual, publish? Oh yeah, here we go. So I can download the PNG now of it and look at it here, right? It's a little bit off, but work in progress. So those kinds of features, I can go in here and say like, right, and change different pieces of it, the subtitle.
So cool.
As well as like range annotations. This is where I'm trying to build in the features like Data Wrapper would have for those type of journalistic type people. Is like I could go in and say, I want to, I can change the style and the theme behind it, or I can change it to light or dark mode, which that clearly isn't working. Or where's the range annotation markup? I can say I want a range between, well now I gotta refresh it because I don't even know what this data says now. Oh, this would be a hard one to range because it's named. So if it was like a value from like dates, then I could give like a date range and then put my date range thing here or add just an annotation. This says like something like, and then say where I want it at, and then it would put the annotation, and then I could drag it around. Is the kind of thing. So it's like a little editing capabilities that it bridges the gap between something like Data Wrapper, which is purely a SaaS product, to being able to generate the base config with AI and then do the fine tunings by hand, because that's usually what needs to be done, these kinds of things. So, but the figures I literally have been building in the last like 48 hours, so this is all like very new to sharing all that. So yeah.
How does Claude actually like know the conclusions of the graph? Is there a textual form, or does it like actually parse the visualization, or does it like have to also get like a table?
Right now it wouldn't know that, but that's part of that spec that I was talking about, where you can return basically like the HTML chart, and then also like the description of what it is.
Yeah, so it actually makes like 2 separate queries. Or...
Yeah, so like think of it almost like ALI or like accessibility.
Mm-hmm.
Is that right? Yeah. You'd almost be like returning like the accessibility description of like, this is a chart with is it,
That's fine.
Dell Marketing
Yeah.
is receiving $8.71 billion, right? It'd be like some long form thing like that it would be able to read, to be able to know what the chart was even saying.
And you're
Because yes, I
generating-
don't think that it can look at it in the sandbox iframe. I don't think it can tell what it wrote, other than
Like take a
looking
screenshot
at the
of
spec
itself,
that it
yeah.
wrote. I think it can look at the spec that it wrote, so it might know that from the spec, in theory.
Oh, from the, okay, from...
Like, this is what the spec looks like.
Does the spec contain the data that is rendering?
Yeah, it doesn't have it in here because I strip it on the figure, but there's a data property, and the data is in this case an array of values, and the values are right.
So the
So
spec is-
you'll be able to see the spec.
The spec is actually sufficient to render the whole thing. It's not, it doesn't like do another SQL query when you're rendering it.
This spec is everything required to render this visualization, and you don't see it, but the data's in there as well. Yeah, again, something I'm working on to just lay it correctly, but so yes, it 100% could be able to see the spec that it sent, and that would be persisted within the context of the chat. So it could always reference the spec for sure. So I don't even know if I would need to return anything from the chart to have it know what it wrote, because it could technically read the spec, and the spec probably does a better job at describing it anyway, right?
So if the underlying data changes, this chart will not be able to regenerate that.
It wouldn't, so it wouldn't here, correct? It would in a figure, because the figures have two different modes. One is, what do I call it? I call it snapshot mode, and that's frozen. And then there's live mode, which is returns from a query. Now right now, everything with the MCP app I'm doing is all snapshots, because I don't want to do the complicated steps of being able to like fetch real data. In fact, in the MCP app side, I think it cannot make HTTP requests, so it would be supported anyway. But within, if you separate that from the actual like web app, the web app 100% can be powered by real data. So like if you wanted to create a chart that updated every single time a data set updated, or like a triple join data sets and one of them updates, like the chart would update as soon as that happened if you had it in your profile. Or embedded it, right? Like one of the things I can do is have an export or a shareable iframe you can embed on a website. Technically that would update as the data updates. I'm not really focused on those kinds of things yet, because that sounds like a scaling nightmare that I don't want to deal with yet. So, but it can, like it's built to do that by, like that's the eventual full design of it, yeah.
I have a question. So for like a TUI, which I don't think can render SVGs right now, because it's like extern. You can do like rasterized images. Would you, if you were like, oh, I want to market this to devs now, and not like journalists or whatever, would you just do like a PNG like in the return from the MCP, or like?
So that would not be an MCP app.
Right. It would
It would probably be, so the other pieces that I have is I have skills, and then I have this, and let me try to find it. Like you could use this today in the demo, which is what I was doing. Let's go here and then go there. You would be looking for the research repo. And that's what I would use if I wanted to do it via terminal. And what this is it's a very thin Astro app with tons and tons of skills baked into it, and agents like data researcher skill and like a journalistic writer skill.
But if you wanted like your chart aesthetics,
Yes.
then the TUI would have to have your same libraries installed and stuff. But otherwise, you could just have your MCP or whatever API return just like the rasterized version.
Yeah,
And
what
that
this
could show up.
what this does is it spins up a dev server that you can preview. So that's how, and it has
Okay.
exports in there. So that's how I would solve that. If you're talking about like having an endpoint that returns an image, in theory, yeah, you could do that from a TUI. That definitely sounds like way too fringe of like a use case.
I would probably do that though.
But like, think about the addressable market of like people wanting to use TUIs to like get a graph return or something like that, right? Like, I just don't know if that's like a.
Maybe not, but
I used the design.md file and it worked great. I sent it to you on Discord, like, it was like 2 months ago.
Yep.
But yeah, I mean, you could just scrape any design.md file you want.
Yeah, and I have that now within Open Data itself. I actually have that, my DesignMD that is, I use the linear kind of thing. In fact, all of this I built after installing the DesignMD and doing the, installing the design system. Yeah. Mhm. So yeah, this is all Claude design. Since the last time I was here, this all looked very different. So, but yeah, that was all off of your DesignMD stuff.
Oh, nice. Quad design looks good.
are you
Yeah.
gonna have an MCP server also for open data?
So technically, MCP apps have an MCP server.
Right.
They're just delivering HTML. So like in theory, it's like kind of already there. I don't think so. And this is a part of the talk that I was thinking about getting into, but this goes into like when to use a skill, when to use a MCP server app, CLI, right? Because all of them have the right places to fit. And to be honest, I am not sure that MCP servers, out of all of those options, are usually the right choice. Like there's a very much fine reason to use that wouldn't be better served probably by a CLI coupled with a skill or a CLI period. So like MCP apps are different because of the UI rendering component of it, that it makes a lot more sense than to have the full MCP, like basically the context cost every single time you serve or have a session is gonna be paid with an MCP app the same way as an MCP server. But that cost seems less and less worth it to me now that we have skills.
Fair enough.
So probably not, but I would have to really think about why, and maybe why would be layman users that need auth. Would
Yes.
maybe be easier with an MCP server. But if they're using an MCP server, at that point, they're probably doing raw queries anyway, right? So like, were they?
Well, if you had like a bunch of journalists, I guess, at a company, and they had like the same app they all used, and they weren't using Claude or web or whatever, maybe that's a different edge case.
The one thing is like, I forget if I showed this, I didn't get any, yeah, let's go to this one because this one had query or SQL queries, but this is what's actually really cool with MCP apps, search data sets, query data set, eventually there'll be an SQL one here. Oh, this one, I believe. When it writes SQL, like right here, let's say that you are on a data science team in a journalism department, you actually click on this and it takes you directly to the sandbox mode that actually runs the full query, and you can go and start editing it here. So those are the kinds of things that I would still say kind of would lean towards an MCP app because of the way it's able to richly render it. And even that, like this stuff here, you can still download and save off as a view. And that view becomes a downloadable asset. So you can make your query, make it into an official dataset download, and then load it into whatever you want, right? So like in theory, a team would be able to have all of their queries saved as views, and those views could power whatever, including an API endpoint, or a downloadable asset that goes into something like Excel, or I have a Python library that is not an SDK that isn't published yet. You use Jupyter Notebooks, right? And so you can make your views in your configurations here, and then just use the Python SDK to then port that over to your team in Jupyter Notebooks and work where you want to work. One of the things I'm trying to do here is not compete with platforms that people like. I'm trying to best integrate wherever I possibly can. So that's why I give the example of Jupyter Notebooks. This is like a lot of data scientists like to work in Jupyter Notebooks.
Like Snowflake and Databricks and stuff like that.
Yeah, but like all the tools are there for you to do it. It's just like cleaning up the data sets or doing some of the last cleanup work on top of the raw data sets can be done here to make it a lot easier than to integrate with those platforms. You don't have to do it there maybe.
Fair enough.
And that it's shareable. It is the bigger thing, right? It's like one person does it, everyone gets it. is one of the things that this could solve, whereas something is like done in another platform like Jupyter Notebooks might be a little less possible, certainly at the mass, like GitHub is, right? Like you make a modal and modals are solved or something, right? You could do the same thing with like 3 joined data sets into one mega table that shows you the economic health of the United States, right? So